My name isn't important yet. What matters is that I'm 32 years old, I live in Atlanta, and 3 weeks before my brother's restaurant opened its doors to 300 guests, I found out my name had been scrubbed from every single piece of material connected to it. Not just the guest list, the investor deck. The 7 press releases sent to Atlanta food publications. The framed founders panel now hanging on the dining room wall, lit by a warm Edison bulb, listing 3 names, none of them mine. The About section of the website I had personally stayed up until 2 in the morning helping build. The promotional materials I had proofread twice. All of it, gone. As if the $38,000 I had wired into his business account over 18 months had simply evaporated into the air. As if the investor I personally called in a favor from. A woman I had worked alongside on 3 different corporate events and whose professional trust I had spent 4 years earning, had materialized in my brother's life by some other miracle. As if the sous chef I had hunted from a closing restaurant across town, the commercial kitchen equipment I negotiated at wholesale pricing, the food critic I knew by first name and personally asked to consider the opening. None of it had ever happened. I found out the way I usually find out things I was never meant to know. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a laptop open and a cup of coffee going cold beside me, browsing my own client portfolio, when an email arrived from a contact at a local food publication. She was fact-checking a preview feature on Atlanta's most anticipated fall openings. Her note was friendly and brief. Just confirming, you're listed as co-founder on your brother's project, right? I have you marked as an investor and creative director, but his team is pushing back on that designation. Can you clarify your role? I read it twice. Then I clicked over to the restaurant website. My name was not there. I searched the press kit his team had sent to the publication. My name was not in it. I pulled up the digital file for the founders panel. 3 names, his business partners, and a man I had met exactly once, who had come in 6 months ago with a modest cash injection, and apparently been assigned a title that now eclipsed mine in the retelling of the story. A man who had contributed a fraction of what I had, and was standing on the wall where I should have been. I sat there for a moment, the coffee got colder. My fiancé came in from the other room and asked what was wrong. I turned the laptop toward him without answering. He read it slowly, the way he does when he needs to be sure he isn't misreading something. Then he looked at me with that specific expression I had come to recognize over 2 years together. The one that wasn't surprise, because he had been watching this dynamic for a long time and had said, more than once, quietly and without drama, that he worried my family was taking more than I understood. He said, "This has to be a mistake." I said, "It isn't." I opened my email and pulled up the thread from 14 months earlier. The one where I transferred the first installment, $15,000. After my brother called me from a lease signing he couldn't cover, his voice thin with the specific desperation of someone who had committed to something without a plan. I scrolled to the message where he wrote back, "I could not have done any of this without you. You are the reason this is happening." I scrolled to the investor introduction I had sent, the email where I put my own name and my own reputation behind his idea and asked a woman I respected to take him seriously. Then I scrolled to the message from 2 weeks ago, a logistics thread from his business partner to the full team, and my email address was not on it. My brother had not forgotten me, he had edited me out. Then my phone buzzed on the table, a text from my mother, 4 words, "Let him have this." No explanation, no acknowledgement of what I had just discovered, no apology or softness or even the pretense of not knowing what was happening. Just that, 4 words that told me everything about what she already knew and what she had already decided. She had known, and her position, delivered in 4 words, was that it was fine. I put the phone face down on the table. My fiancé was still watching me. I could feel him choosing carefully, the way he does when a situation is serious enough that the wrong sentence could crack something open before either of us was ready. He said, finally, "What do you want to do?" I thought about it. I thought about what staying in Atlanta meant. Sitting through the grand opening with a name tag that said guest, while my brother stood in a dining room I helped build and accepted congratulations from people I had introduced him to. Smiling next to the founders panel where my name was absent. Listening to my mother call that harmony. I thought about calling my brother and waiting while he explained it as a branding decision, a miscommunication. Something his PR person had suggested, something temporary, something he would fix. Someday, later, when it was convenient, and meanwhile 300 people would photograph that wall and those 3 names and the story would calcify around the version that didn't include me. I said, I need to not be here. He nodded once, he picked up his phone. By evening we had a flight booked and a cottage lined up. My fiancé had a college friend who owned a place near the harbor on Nantucket, had offered it to us twice in the past 2 years, and we had declined both times because there was always something else happening, some fire I was putting out, some gap I was filling. We took him up on it now. Before I went to sleep that night I did 3 things. I opened my work calendar, found the block I had labeled Brothers Opening, Do Not Schedule, and deleted it. I found the family group chat, the one that had spent 3 weeks buzzing with catering photos and countdown posts, where I had contributed logistics and nobody had acknowledged my name once, and I left it. And I opened my files and found the scanned receipts for every wire transfer I had sent him. $38,000 in 7 separate installments, each one documented, each one a quiet decision I had made alone and never asked anyone to notice. I put the files in a folder labeled Records and I closed the laptop. We were at the airport before 7 the next morning. When the plane lifted over the city, I felt the exact physical sensation of putting something heavy down. Not happiness yet, but the absence of a weight I had forgotten was weight. The cottage sat at the end of a narrow lane lined with hydrangeas gone rust and copper in the fall. The harbor was visible from the back porch, gray and wide, with lobster boats tracking slow across it through the morning fog. We arrived on a Thursday. The grand opening was Saturday. I did not look at my phone for the first 12 hours. My fiancé made coffee on an old stovetop percolator, and we sat on the porch with blankets across our laps and watched the water move. At some point he asked me when I had stopped building things for myself and started spending all my resources building things for other people. I said I wasn't entirely sure. Probably around age 24, when my brother called from a city he had impulsively moved to, and I wired him money I had saved for a design conference I had genuinely wanted to attend. He hadn't asked me to. I just did it because that was the shape I had learned to fit, the one who holds things together. The one who doesn't ask to be seen doing it because asking would make it smaller somehow, would make it feel like a transaction instead of love. I said that out loud and then stopped talking. The harbor sat there, completely indifferent to all of it. Saturday morning came. My fiancé got up before me and came back to bed with his phone held at an angle I recognized as something he was still deciding how to hand me. I asked him what happened. He said it didn't go the way he expected. The first video had been posted by a food blogger who had been at the event. It was shaky, shot from a corner of the room where the bar met the windows, and the audio was imperfect but clear enough. In the video, the investor, the woman I had personally brought to my brother, whose attention I had earned over 4 years of professional trust, was standing with a glass of wine and speaking to the person next to her loudly enough to carry. She was asking where I was. She used my name. She said, "I'm sorry, I need to ask, because the person who made this happen is not in this room and I find that very hard to understand." The room in the video went quiet. My brother said something off camera. The investor's face settled into the specific stillness of a woman who has just understood that she was used as a prop in a story that was never honest with her. The video had 53,000 views by the time I watched it. My fiancé showed me the next one without saying anything. It was a story post from the sous chef. He had posted a photo of the kitchen during prep, pots stacked and surfaces gleaming, and the caption read, "Quick note since some people are asking. The person who found me, hired me, and built the foundation of everything you're eating tonight is not here. I think that should be on the record." He had tagged me. The comments were already building. Who is she? What happened? Why isn't she credited? This is not okay. His post had been shared over 800 times before the night was out. I set my fiancé's phone on the mattress and looked at the ceiling for a moment. I wasn't gloating. There was nothing triumphant in it. What I felt was the specific sensation of a knot being cut, not because I wanted the wreckage that followed, but because the knot had been there for years and I had been the only one holding both ends. The room was spinning for them now, and I was not in it, and for the first time in longer than I could track, that was exactly where I chose to be. My fiancé said, "You're very calm about this." I said, "Because for once I don't have to fix it." The calls started that afternoon. My mother, my father, my brother, 5 times in 2 hours. A number I didn't recognize that turned out to be his business partner. I declined each one and set the phone face down on the porch railing. The voicemails stacked up. I didn't open a single one. The texts came in waves. My mother, "There are things being said online and it is damaging our family. You need to call me now." My father, "I don't know what is happening, but you are making this worse by not responding. Call your brother." My brother himself, 3 separate messages, each one a slightly different version of the same ask. "Can you say something publicly? Can you tell people this is a misunderstanding? Can you help me with this narrative?" Until the last one, which was the clearest and the most honest he had been with me in 2 years. "You are the only one who knows how to fix these things. I need you." I read that last one 4 times. I had believed for a long time that being the one who knew how to fix things was a form of mattering. It wasn't, it was a job description. A utility. I fixed things the way a circuit breaker absorbs voltage, silently, reliably, and replaced without ceremony when something else went wrong. My fiancé found me on the porch with the phone in my hand. He sat down, he waited. He did not try to tell me what to feel or what to do. I said, "I'm going to block them." He said, "Is that what you actually want, or is that just the anger talking?" I said, "It's both, and I've been carrying this long enough to trust it." I blocked my mother, I blocked my father, I blocked my brother. I sat there in the quiet afterward and let it settle around me like the fog coming off the harbor. Not an hour later, my phone buzzed with a text from my cousin, younger than me, quieter than most of our family, someone who had always kept her distance from any conflict that might cost her socially. Her message was 2 sentences. "I saw everything. You don't owe them a single word." I read it 3 times. Something in my chest shifted, not dramatically, but the way a room changes when someone finally opens a window that has been painted shut. On Sunday morning, I opened my laptop for the first time since we'd arrived. There was an email from an attorney whose name I recognized from estate correspondence after my grandfather's death. The woman who had handled his affairs for 20 years and whom I had understood to have stepped away from any ongoing role. Her email was brief and asked if I was available to speak at my earliest convenience about a matter connected to my grandfather's estate. She used the words, "Documentation has come to light that I believe you need to be aware of." I called her from the back porch, with the harbor spread out in front of me. She told me that when my grandfather restructured his estate plan 18 months before he died, he had added a direct bequest to me, a parcel of coastal Georgia land that his financial advisor had independently appraised at considerable value, along with a designated share of his investment portfolio. He had done it deliberately. He had told 2 people, her and the notary. He had chosen, she said, not to announce it to the family because he understood the dynamics well enough to know that announcement would invite interference before the paperwork was secure. She said my mother had been present the day he signed the updated documents. She said my mother had presented an older version of the will to the family after he passed and allowed everyone to proceed under the assumption that it was the final one. She said she had stayed quiet out of loyalty and fear, that she had told herself it was not her place, that she had believed silence was a form of mercy. She said she no longer believed that. She said, "The notarized documents are intact and on record. If you want to pursue this, I can tell you with confidence that the law is on your side." I stood at that porch railing for a long time after the call ended. The fog had burned off and the water was a flat, clean gray all the way to the horizon. I wasn't angry, I wasn't even surprised, not exactly. It was more the feeling of a thing clicking into place that you have always half known was there. All the unease at family dinners when my grandfather's accounts came up. The way my mother changed the subject whenever I asked questions about the property in Georgia. The particular quality of her silence whenever I mentioned his name. It all made the same sense now. When my fiancé came out and found me, I told him everything, slowly, without rushing it. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You built everything real in your life without their help and without their permission. This just confirms what you already knew about yourself." He was right, and 2 days after we flew home, my phone rang with a call I had been waiting over a year to receive. A national hospitality brand that had been reviewing proposals from 5 agencies had chosen mine. The contract was the largest I had ever signed. I laughed out loud in my own kitchen, pressing my palm flat against the counter to steady myself, not because of the number but because of the timing. Because my family had called my agency a hobby. Because my brother had told his friends I was dabbling. Because I had spent so long seeking recognition from people who had already decided my ceiling, and here was proof, arriving on its own terms, that I had been building something real the entire time. The legal process that followed was not quiet. There were filings and hearings and late phone calls with my attorney that went longer than expected. But the documents were notarized. The timeline was airtight. My grandfather's intentions were on record in his own handwriting, witnessed by 2 people with no reason to lie. At the preliminary hearing, my attorney described the position as strong. The judge agreed. I did not speak to my mother or my brother during any of it. What I did instead, one Sunday morning about 3 weeks into the process, was write a letter. Not for them to read, for me to finish. I sat at my kitchen table and I wrote down everything, every year of it. The conference I didn't attend at 24. The promotion I quietly negotiated down because my mother said my success made my brother feel inadequate. The $38,000, the investor, the sous chef, the website, the receipts in the folder labeled records. I wrote until the pages were full and my hand ached and there was nothing left to say. Then I drove to the river that runs along the edge of the city, found a bend where the bank was quiet and no one was around, and I burned the pages on a flat rock near the water. I watched the smoke lift into the trees and I felt something in my chest unknot that had been tightening since I was in my mid-20s and first learned to make myself useful instead of asking to be valued. I didn't need them to read it. I just needed to stop being the only one who was holding it. My fiancé proposed properly 2 months after Nantucket. A real proposal, with a question and a ring, and a night I remember all of clearly. We moved into a place together near a park with good light and a back porch where I drink my coffee in the mornings without checking anyone else's calendar first. My mother stopped calling sometime in the 2nd month. My brother sent 2 more messages, both of them asking me to help manage what he called the public narrative around the opening. I didn't respond to either one. The founder's wall, I later heard, had been quietly updated. I was not in a position to verify that and I found I didn't care enough to check. My cousin came to visit us in the spring. We had dinner on the porch and she said she was proud of me, and I believed her, the way you believe people who say things that cost them something to say. The hospitality contract renewed. The property in coastal Georgia was transferred into my name that December. I haven't gone to see it yet, I'm not ready, but I know it exists. Quiet, waiting. The way things wait when they were always supposed to belong to you, and just needed the right documentation to prove it. My grandfather told his attorney that I was the only one in the family who understood responsibility without expecting applause. I have thought about those words many times since. He was right that I understood it. What he did not account for, what nobody in my family ever stopped to consider, was whether I wanted to spend the rest of my life being that. I got to decide. That is the part nobody plans into the story for you. If you have spent years being the one who funds things and fixes things and holds things together while someone else takes the credit, I need you to hear this. The silence you are keeping is not loyalty. It is labor, and you are allowed to stop. You do not have to leave in anger. You can leave in clarity. You can book a flight to somewhere cold and foggy, and sit on a back porch and let the water remind you that it has never once asked anyone for permission to move. You can stop answering the phone. You can block the numbers without a dramatic exit. You can file the paperwork. You can write the letter, burn it at the river, and walk back to your car lighter than you have been in years. You are not the problem. You were never the problem. You were the solution they borrowed and forgot to credit. The most powerful thing you can do with that truth is stop letting them borrow it for free. If this story found you at the right moment, tell me where you're listening from, and subscribe, because this was never only my story to tell.